Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys all the books that I've read for the month of July, August, and September. So a 3-month span. I believe I read 7 books. As you guys know from previous videos, you'll know that I have been struggling with a 6-month-long reading slump, and this past summer I was finally able to pretty much get myself out of that reading slump. So I have slowly started getting back into reading. Obviously it's still a process for me to get out of this reading slump. I think a lot of the reason why I went through this massive reading slump was a combination of just life stress and school stress, and also the fact that I haven't had a 5-star read in far too long. I feel like that's one of the main things that kind of put me into a reading slump, is the fact that I've just been kind of reading books that I've been rating 3 stars or lower. And yes, I do have the occasional 4-star books here and there, but it's just not sufficient enough. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but I am craving and dying for a 5-star read here. I need a book that's gonna make me fall back in love with reading all again. So leave a comment down below on a book that you've read recently, or just a book in general that kind of made you pick it up and you were like, oh my gosh, I love reading, a 5-star book. Without further ado, let's get on into the books that I've read for the past 3 months. I also have none of the physical books with me right now, so I'm reading them all off a notes app on my phone from all the notes that I just made of the books. I will put obviously the book on the screen so that you guys can see what it looks like and who the author is by, of course. But the first book that I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I gave this book 4 stars. It was so freaking cute. I loved this book. Okay, I don't want to say love because I feel like love is... No, I feel like I can say I love that book. I did love that book. You guys will know if a book is a 5 stars for me, not only by me just saying the book was 5 stars, but the fact that I never shut up about the book. That's how you know the book is 5 stars for me. But anyways, I really liked Beach Read by Emily Henry. It was so cute. One of the things I really enjoyed about the book is it was actually set in my home state, Michigan. So it was really cool to be able to read a book that was set in my state, just because I feel like I read a lot of books that aren't set in Michigan. And where this book was set, it was up in northern Michigan on, I think it was called North Bear Shores or something like that. And it's at the peak, the very peak of the UP, I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly. It's up by Houghton, Michigan, and I've been up there before, so I know exactly where this book takes place, which is so cool to me because I have pictures from this place. So that's really cool for me to be able to visualize that in my head. I know where this book is, and it really itched the right spot in my brain. But anyways, moving on. This book is an enemies to friends to lovers kind of romance. So if that is kind of up in your alley, I definitely recommend this book just because it was so well written in that department. I would also describe this book as kind of related to Gilmore Girls kind of banter. In my opinion, I feel just Emily Henry's writing in general. I've only read 2 books by her, Happy Place and Beach Read, but I feel a lot of her books, or I guess the last 2 books that I've read by her, the banter in the books very much reminds me of a Gilmore Girls episode, the way the characters interact, and I really liked it. So I would highly recommend it if you guys like Gilmore Girls, to give Emily Henry a try, just because I feel it itched that same part in my brain that Gilmore Girls does. So I definitely liked that part of it. This book kind of does have some trigger warnings in it. It does talk about the death of a parent, so if you are kind of uneasy about that kind of topic, I definitely maybe wouldn't read this. Then again, we all have our own capabilities of whatever, so definitely look up the trigger warnings of any book before you read it. But this book also does mention abuse in it as well, so keep that in mind. But one thing I also really liked about this book is it reminded me of the Taylor Swift Love Story music video, because in the book they kind of have that whole holding up the sign thing through the window, and it was so cute and I loved it. If you guys are fans of Taylor Swift, I highly recommend Beach Read by Emily Henry because it gives love story vibes. Low-key gives love story vibes. The main plot point of this whole book is it's a writer, her name, oh gosh, I can't even remember her name right now, but it's 2 writers. They first met back in college. They would always kind of butt heads because they were both writers, and they're both at a point right now in their career where they are kind of going through writing block kind of period, where they both need to be producing books, but they have such a big writer's writer's block that they start a competition between the two to switch genres of writing. So basically she starts writing a book in his genre and he writes a book in her genre. She writes romance books, he writes kind of like dark novels. So they switch and they compete and they see who has the better novel by the end of the book. And obviously it's a love story, it's really cute, it's kind of lighthearted but also kind of deep in the same sense. It's just a really cute romance book. So if you guys are looking for a good romance book that is, I don't want to say fast-paced, but kind of fast-paced, kind of slow burn in the same sense. Not too much slow burn, but like it's, you can definitely tell they're both having trouble trying to open up to each other because they're both semi-emotionally unavailable in their own respects, if that makes sense. So yeah, I definitely recommend Beach Read by Emily Henry. I give it 4 stars, so definitely go read it. Highly recommend. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below if you've read any of these books, by the way. Moving on to the second book that I've read in the past 3 months, The Guilt Trip by Sandy Jones. I believe that's the author's name. I gave this book 2 stars. I did not like this book at all, and I mainly didn't like this book a lot because of the characters and also just because the plot itself just felt so predictable to me and it just really wasn't all that interesting to me. I feel like I've read psychological thrillers that are more interesting. I know that's maybe really mean to say, but it's the truth. That's how I feel about it. I didn't really like it, but maybe if you are starting off with psychological thrillers and you haven't really read any psychological thrillers, maybe this is kind of your way to, you know, dip your toe in. Basically, the book is about 6 people who go on this vacation and it's a destination wedding. There's 6 people in the group, but they're like all couples, so like each is a pair, and a lot of them, all of them have secrets that they're like hiding from the group, and throughout like the couple of days leading up to the wedding, all the secrets kind of like start coming to light, and then at the wedding this big thing happens and more secrets happen, and it's a murder mystery psychological thriller, but in my opinion it's more of a psychological thriller than a murder mystery. The book is also very fast-paced, so if you are looking for a fast-paced book that you just kind of want to, like, you know, scroll through and like get through pretty fast, I would recommend it. But again, in my opinion, I feel like there's better psychological thrillers out there than this one, and I just really didn't like the way the book was written or the way the characters were written. I have a feeling the author purposely made it so the characters were like unlikable, because none of the characters I liked whatsoever, and they were all so obnoxious and so annoying, and I couldn't do it. It was so annoying. So I don't know. If anybody else has read that book, let me know your thoughts below, because it just didn't really hit for me, unfortunately. The next book I read was The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, I believe is the author. I gave this book 3 stars. This book is also a spin-off of the classical book Jane Eyre, I think is what it's called. I don't like classical books. If you guys have stuck around on my channel for a long time, you'll know that I don't like classical books. I don't read them in reading vlogs. I don't really talk about them on my channel. I think the only time that I ever talked about classical books on this channel is because I had to read them for a class. It's the only time you'll really ever see me read a classical book, and to be quite honest, the only classical books that I've really liked is The Great Gatsby. I don't even know if that's considered a classical book, but if it is, Great Gatsby, The Bell Jar, and I think that's it. Unless The Outsider's considered a classic book, but I don't think it is. If it is a classical book, add that one to the list, but I don't think it is. Anyways, besides the point. Like I said, this one is a retelling of a classical book. Again, I haven't read that classical book. I haven't read Jane Eyre, so maybe I'm like missing the point of the book. I thought it was good. It's definitely very fast paced. There are definitely no lulls in the book. I was able to read the book pretty fast, I think within a week or a week and a half. It just was kind of predictable. It didn't really captivate my attention 110%. Like, I wasn't thinking about it 24/7 or anything like that, which I feel like with a psychological thriller or a murder mystery or just a thriller book in general, if I'm thinking about the book 24/7, then it's a good book in my opinion. But if I'm not thinking about it and I don't really like, I feel like it's so mean to say, but I'm so picky about my murder mysteries, psychological thrillers, and thrillers in general. Like, it has to come out of left field so much for me to like it, and like, it has to be one of those books where I don't predict it at all, like the ending, for me to give it like a 4 or 5 star. So I don't know. It was good. It was definitely fast paced. Personally, not my taste. Again, it's a retelling of a classical book. Maybe that's not why it's my taste. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about that book. The next book I read is That One Night by Emily Rath, which is a novella in the Jacksonville Rays hockey romance series. I don't know how many books are in that series, but I read the novella and I haven't read Pucking Around, which is the first book in the series. I do have it added to my Kindle and I did start it, but I have not finished it, nor have I gotten anywhere past 5% in it. So like I said, That One Night is a novella, and so it's like really short, and I gave it 3 stars, mainly because I really, sorry, I'm using a ring light right now and it totally just fell. Okay, I really hope that stays. Anyways, moving on. That One Night is a novella, so it's the prequel basically to Pucking Around, and it basically just talks about how the two love interests met and kind of like why they split, and then obviously in Pucking Around they come back together. But the novella is mostly just smut and spicy scenes, so if that's not really your taste, don't really recommend reading it. I enjoyed it. Obviously it was super short. There wasn't much of a plot point in it. The whole plot was how they met and then they left each other, and then in Pucking Around is when the plot really starts. So I feel like there's not much for me to say about the novella because it was so short. Anyways, moving on. The next book I read is The Kill Order by James Dashner. This is the prequel, one of the prequels to the Maze Runner series. This one is the first prequel, and then there's a second prequel called The Kill Order and then Fever Code. I think that's what it's called. The Kill Order is the first novella in the series, and this one is pretty much following how Cranks came to be and also how the Flayer started. So in this book, you follow around completely different character cast. It has no Thomas. Well, okay, I take that back. It has young Thomas, like baby Thomas, at the very end of it, leading up to Fever Code, because Fever Code is all about Thomas and Teresa and how the maze was made and all of that. But The Kill Order has nothing to do with Thomas or Teresa or any of the original characters from the original Maze Runner plotline. This book has completely different characters in it, and it's pretty interesting honestly to read about it because it talks about how like the very early days of when the Flayer first started and how the world looked with the Flayer and the floods and all that kind of stuff. And then it furthermore talks about how Cranks came to be, which was super interesting because in the original storyline of the Maze Runner, they don't really talk about how the Cranks were like made pretty much or how that all happened, but like you know it had something to do with the Flayer, and they just don't really like talk about it much. All we know is they're trying to find the cure for the Flayer and for the Cranks. But in this one, it gives you like the whole rundown, and it's really interesting, but it also was a little confusing to follow at first just because it was so, this book was much more apocalyptic than the actual Maze Runner timeline. Like I would honestly even consider this one like a zombie apocalypse kind of book. Like that's the kind of vibe I get from this. And then the Maze Runner series is like more of a dystopian post-apocalyptic kind of vibe. The ending, however, to this one was kind of confusing for me because like I said at the very beginning of me explaining all this, we get a small snippet of Thomas being given over to Wicked, which we also see in the movies, which is really interesting to me because we see that whole plot in The Kill Order, which is really interesting to me. And I'm pretty sure we also see it in one of the Maze Runner books, I'm pretty sure, but I can't remember which one it is. But we kind of see that little snippet of, you know, Thomas's mom handing him off to Wicked to obviously go and save the world or whatever it may be. But before that little like epilogue part, there's a part where the characters in The Kill Order were with this little girl and they like gave her over to Wicked, so to say. It wasn't called Wicked in the book, it was called something else, which is also really interesting. So it sounds like Wicked kind of started off as something different and then they transitioned their name into Wicked. I don't know how that all happened. I'm pretty sure I might find that out in Fever Code. But the little girl that they handed over to Wicked, so to say, because she had like the blood that was like, is basically like the cure, she isn't Thomas. But I also don't know if she's Teresa. I don't think she's Teresa. She might be, I don't know. Maybe we'll find that out in Fever Code, but I don't know. The ending kind of confused me because it had like nothing to do with the characters in the original plot line. So that was a little confusing for me. But other than that, I enjoyed it. It was really, really fun being brought back into the Maze Runner world because I love that series so much. It is one of the books that honestly got me back into reading as a kid. So if you guys haven't read the Maze Runner series, you're living under a rock first and foremost. You need to go read it. It is so good. And then go watch the movies because it has Dylan O'Brien in it. So what other, you know, contributing factor do you need to go watch that movie? The next book I read, well, I more listened to this book. I didn't read it, but I listened to the audiobook of it. But I'm gonna put it in this as reading it because it counts in my opinion. Audiobooks count, okay? I read Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I gave this book a 4 stars because it was honestly so eye-opening for me. I have such a hard time developing new habits and also just like keeping already existing habits because I know I have ADHD and I also have anxiety and depression, and forming habits with anxiety and depression is so difficult because sometimes I get all in my head and I just want to lay in bed and I just don't want to do my habits. But that's not how habit forming works, okay? That's not how it works. You need to be consistent with it. So I really liked listening to this book. I listened to it a lot when I was at the gym and also just on walks in general. It was really fun to listen to. I'm gonna share with you guys a couple of the takeaways that I learned from Atomic Habits, just like the key points that I found very, I guess, helpful for me. So I'm just going to share those here with you guys. While goals are important to have, the systems that get us to completing the goals are key. Pretend you're already who you want to become and act accordingly, which honestly, in my opinion, just sounds like manifesting. You have to get to that point, you just have to act like you already have that kind of stuff, which I learned long ago, but for some reason it clicked in my head this time while listening to this book. Habits equal freedom. Create a more disciplined environment. Pair an action you have to do with an action you want to do. Master the art of showing up, which is so important. And if you take anything away from this book, that is like, I would feel like the #1 key thing is the art of showing up. For example, like say you want to develop the habit of going to the gym. You do not have to be in the gym for an hour every single day. Just showing up to the gym, and say you're just showing up to the gym and you're walking on the treadmill for 20 minutes and then you leave. Okay, cool. And then the next day you come and you work out for 30 minutes or less than 20 minutes. It's just the fact that you are building the habit of showing up consistently, and then after that, like after you've built the habit of just showing up, then you can start adding on, okay, I want to do weightlifting, okay, I want to do this, okay, I want to do that. It's when I learned the art of showing up, it was so mind-changing for me. And maybe this isn't mind-changing for anybody else, but for somebody who has a really hard time building and sticking to habits, that was like such a mind-blowing concept to me. Just the art of showing up, because I'm such an overachiever and I feel like if I have to show up to something, it has to be for the same time every single day. So if in my head, if I go to the gym, I have to go to the gym for an hour, and if I don't do that every single week or every single day of the week or however long I want to like make this a habit, if I'm not doing it for that long, to me in my head, that's a failure. But realistically, it's not a failure, because as long as you're showing up and you're putting in the work, even if it's 20 minutes, even if it's 10 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes, even if you're just, you know, leaving your house to go to the gym, that is showing up for yourself, and it's creating the habit of going to the gym. So I don't know. Take that with what you will. Some people might be like, wow, Mel, that's seriously a new concept for you? That's like common sense. I know. What a girl's gotta do, you know? Never miss twice. So for example, say you wanna take an off day, you skip a day at the gym, never miss twice, because in the book he was talking about how if you miss twice, then that becomes a habit of missing, and then that's just going back on your progress. You have to fall in love with boredom, and then underneath that it says, the greatest threat to success is not failure, it's boredom. Once you get bored of a habit, obviously you're not gonna wanna do it anymore. So for example, me and editing. I love editing videos, but at the same time, it can get really boring, which is why I like to switch up my editing technique every so often, because if I don't switch up my editing technique and I just continue with the same editing technique always, I feel like I'm gonna get super bored of it. And granted, my editing technique for the past couple of years has pretty much remained the same, but I change things here and there. So that's what's kind of fun for me. The tighter we hold on to an identity, the harder it becomes to grow beyond it. Which I have never felt so heard in a statement like that before. I don't know if you guys were around or how many of you guys were around when I first started doing book content on my channel, but I burnt myself out from book content pretty early on just because I felt like people like labeled me as a booktuber, and I personally don't like being labeled as a booktuber. I just like calling myself a YouTuber in general, just because I feel like if I niche myself down to a certain topic so much, I feel like I can't do content outside of that. So when people kept calling me like, oh, like she's my favorite booktuber, don't take this any offense. Like, I love when people are like, oh my gosh, she's my favorite booktuber. That's such a big compliment to me. But for myself, can't label myself as a booktuber or a certain thing, because I feel like if I label myself as that, I like put myself in a box and I have to do that specific niche thing, and if I don't do that specific niche thing, then I'm gonna like fail. But realistically, I have so many more like in-depth things to me. Like, there's more to me than just reading. There's more to me than just, you know, showing you my everyday life. Like, I like doing podcasts, I like reading, I like true crime, and maybe that's my own fault for not like showing all of those aspects of my life. But it's also really hard to show all of those aspects of my life, because I feel like if I go too broad with my content, I'm not gonna get as many people that like are interested in my content, if that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe that's just me being in my own head, but that's how I viewed it. Okay, and the last book that I read was The Only Child by, I don't even know how to say this author's name, so I don't want to say it because I know I'm gonna butcher it so bad, but obviously the book is going to be on the screen. But I gave The Only Child 3 stars. This was a psychological thriller. I also started this book, I'm pretty sure, like 2 years ago, and then I DNF'd it right after because it was just super slow paced. The book isn't not interesting or anything. Like, it's an interesting book and the concept of it is really fascinating, but the pace of the book was just super slow for me. It just didn't hook me right away, and I kind of had to like force myself to sit down and force myself to get through the kind of slow paced parts of the book so that I could actually finish the book. The one cool thing about this book though is this book is set in Korea, so it is an international book, which is kind of cool. I feel like I've never really read like an international book or where the book is set in like a different country. I feel like all the books that I've read are either set in America or they're fantasy books, so they're like fantasy countries and stuff like that. It's about this woman who is a criminal psychologist, and she is interviewing a really well-known famous serial killer. She's like going and interviewing him, and she's trying to like figure out, you know, why he did what he did and just stuff in general about the serial killer. He refused to be interviewed by anybody else but this specific criminal psychologist. But then there's like 2 separate plot points in this book, and they kind of intertwine, but they also don't at all at the end. And the one plot point is this criminal psychologist interviewing this serial killer, and then there's the criminal psychologist at home with her husband who has a child, and her parents and her grandparents died, so then the father took her in with his wife, the criminal psychologist, and the daughter is a little weird, and she's kind of showing like low-key like serial killer vibes and like serial killer attributes, and it all intertwines in the end, sort of, but like also not really. I don't know. It was really underwhelming in my opinion. I feel like the book kind of like hyped it up so much that it was so intertwined, and then, you know, I got to the ending and I was like not disappointed, but a little like, I was just like, oh, I felt like we talked this whole entire like time about this book, and it kind of like played it up that it was intertwined, but it really wasn't at the end. And I don't know, it kind of felt like a little bit of a letdown, and I was a little bit confused. Like, there is intertwining, but not the intertwining that you think there is, which is, I guess, where my disappointment comes in. But I don't know, it was pretty interesting. Like I said, the pace is kind of slow in it. Do be aware of that. Another thing that was kind of difficult for me is all of the names are obviously Korean names, so I did listen to the audiobook of this book while I was reading it so that I could understand how to pronounce the Korean names, because I first started reading this book just by myself without the audiobook, and I think I like read first like 70 pages and I did not know how to pronounce these Korean names at all, and I was so confused, and I was like, I just like kept skipping over the names. Like, you know how when you don't understand a name or like a concept in a book and you kind of just like, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna make up a name. That's kind of what I did, and I was like, okay, I don't want to do that because I really want to understand like kind of like what they're saying. But I don't know, the cultural aspect to it was kind of cool. Reading a book set in a different country, set in a different culture, and just everything like that was very interesting. Anyways, those are all the books that I read for the past 3 months. Again, I read these books in July, August, and September, so pretty much like halfway through summer and then also a little bit into fall. But yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you guys have read any of these books, please let me know in the comment section down below if you have, what your thoughts are on them, and also let me know what your favorite 5-star book is, or a book that made you fall in love with reading and that you never stop thinking about. Let me know in the comment section down below because I am starving, literally starving for a 5-star read. It's not even funny. I love you guys all so much, and I will see you guys all in my next video. Bye guys. It's literally 3:50 in the morning. We're back on my no sleep bullshit.
I used to take myself out on dates, open my own damn doors, pay for everything on my plate. Sometimes I'd even get the steak, cause I got it like that. Always had my own bag, never needed no man to rely on. Got 2 good shoulders to cry.